Hello, and welcome to another episode of Archives and Anchovies, the podcast about whatever it is I feel like talking about that week. I've got a little bit different setup this week in a different room and trying things out, doing some experimentation. You could say it's a new year, new me, and that's what this episode is about. It's about New Year's resolutions and how they came to be and why people don't stick to them. And there's some psychology definitely around why people don't stick to their New Year's resolutions. We've had a fantastic start to the year. I was in California over the weekend, the first part of the year, and I'm actually recording this on a Monday. Typically, I record them on like a Saturday or Sunday, but I had a gig on Saturday, so drove to California, played the gig that night, and then drove back from California Sunday night in time to see the Steelers game. For those of you listening, I'm wearing a Steelers shirt and I just pointed to the logo. Been a Steelers fan since I was 4. It was a super exciting game, Ravens Steelers. They won the division and I'm super excited about that as well. Maybe someday there'll be some sort of sports talk on this podcast, but that's not going to be today. You know, I love golf, but I do love watching football as well. So that's not going to be what today is about. So great week, great weekend. We had a very, very fun gig, and it was something that is a great way to kick off a new year. So another thing that really strikes me every year is I come into the year thinking that I want to do some things different, and I think everybody is reflective in how their year went, and then they look at what is going to happen in the future. And that's kind of where New Year's resolutions come in. And that's what we're talking about today. We are going to dive into how New Year's resolutions came to be, how New Year's resolutions are generally not kept for very long, and kind of the psychology. And then I might share a couple stories that I read online of some pretty epic failures as far as New Year's resolutions go. So New Year's resolutions really started with the ancient Babylonians. So really 4,000 years ago. And if you've listened to any of the podcasts before, especially when we talked about time and we talked about how we time keep, and in addition to that, how we became to have navigation and things, a lot of things started with the ancient Babylonians. So they were kind of the first people to make their New Year's resolutions. They didn't begin in January, of course, because that calendar wasn't around. So it really kind of started mid-March when they planted crops. And they called it a celebration. It was something called a Kitu. It lasted 12 days. And during the festival, the Babylonians would make promises to their gods. They'd mostly want fertile crops. They'd also want children to be born and children to survive. They would want the things that we want today, good health, and they basically wanted to earn favor from their gods and not be punished. So if you broke your promise, you'd fall out of divine favor with them because the god would be mad at you. And that's not where you wanted to be. So it was really a promise, not necessarily to yourself or to someone else to try to make good on the commitment that you had, but it was really to appease the gods so that you could have good favor. So fast forward a really long time, and we get to 46 BC. Julius Caesar, he basically decided to tinker with the calendar. So that's kind of still the calendar that we use today. So it is very common and very familiar. Just like the Babylonians celebrated for 12 days, we have 12 months in our calendar year now. And the first month of every year is called January. And that basically is the beginning of the new year. And he named January after the god Janus. He was a two-faced Roman god. So if you think of two faces opposing each other, one was looking backward at the year that was previous, and one was looking forward towards the next year. So it was kind of a great symbolism for the reflection and committing to having a great year going forwards. The Romans, just like the Babylonians, would make promises of good conduct to Janus. And the tradition of using this time actually started to be more personal reflection and personal renewal. And that's where it started to take a more familiar turn as we know it right now, where we personally say, hey, this is what I'm going to try to do this year. This is some of my goals this year. And these are the resolutions that I'm making. So it really gets interesting because they were more tied to morality at this point than religion. So it was more of a moral aspect that they had versus they still wanted to appease the gods, but now it was something to more that they wanted to have a morally apt type of resolution for people. So it's kind of interesting because really the time period between the Babylonians and when Caesar created the calendar, I couldn't find a whole lot as any type of more traditions that came through, and our traditions here at our house have changed a lot over the years. We used to have giant New Year's parties, and we used to have people over, and it was a lot of fun. Uh, I don't want the fireworks to go on till 2 o'clock in the morning. I used to go to Walmart or something, and I used to buy the big pack of fireworks, and we used to let them off all night long. And we would go from midnight, we'd go 12:30 or 1 o'clock. And really, our neighbors now launch the larger fireworks. They more irritate our dogs than anything else. If you have dogs, you can relate, trying to calm your dogs down. Fortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, we now have a small dog who has gone deaf and has lost her hearing. So she actually laid there all night and was oblivious to the whole thing. But one of our other dogs still very uncomfortable. So I am going to go off on a little tangent about fireworks and how they came to be a celebration and celebratory as well. So it kind of ties into our resolutions. So New Year's tradition that is universal kind of around the world, other than resolutions, is fireworks. Cloth, or you think of an exploding piece of cardboard now, is what they put them in. It is a symbolism for an explosion. You explode into the new year, and you are basically spreading promise for the rest of the year. So the connection really kind of goes back to, go centuries. It's actually tied to the same kind of impulses as resolutions. They were warding off evil as kind of what they used them for at that period of time, and then welcoming good fortune. So fireworks were invented in China around 200 BC. So a little bit before Julius Caesar did the calendar. And there are some historians, though, that say that they might have been even earlier, but in the research that I did, that was kind of the time frame that I found. The story goes that a Chinese cook accidentally mixed together, and I wrote this down, charcoal, sulfur, and saltpeter, which were all common items in the kitchen. And apparently, he just basically made them explode. This mixture, he lit it on fire and it created an explosion. And somehow he thought that everybody should see this explosion that he made and thought it would be cool. And in addition to that, he said, hey, let's put this in some bamboo tubes and let's see what happens when we light it on fire. It was probably a much more exciting kitchen than my kitchen. Hopefully, you don't have too many fires in your kitchen. And when you do, you have a way to put them out. If I see a fire in the kitchen, I'm not excited about it and I don't go tell people about it. It's something to where I try to put it out as fast as possible, but not for the Chinese cook. So he put the mixture in a bamboo tube. And what happened next was pretty incredible. The bamboo would explode with a loud bang. It would make a visible explosion as well. And the Chinese quickly realized that they thought these explosions would scare away the evil spirits. So what ended up happening is they called these bamboo filled tubes, Baozu. I'm probably pronouncing that incorrectly, so feel free to correct me in the comments if you know exactly what it's called. But it actually literally meant, as a translation for English, exploding bamboo. So it definitely symbolizes what it is that they were trying to do. And before long, they were setting them off at New Year's celebrations. And for their New Year's, the Chinese New Year, it falls sometime between January and typically mid-February, based on the lunar calendar versus the calendar that Caesar had put together. So it was pretty simple. They thought it was loud noises. The spirits would go away. The bright light would also drive away the evil spirits, and it would basically remove the bad luck from them and bring them good fortune into the new year. So it's really kind of the same reason that a lot of cultures made noise at midnight. So when I was growing up as a kid, we would grab pots and pans, or we would grab anything we could. At one point, I had a triangle because I was in like concert band. So I did a triangle. My brother John would shoot off blanks into our yard and with his gun. And, we just made a bunch of noise and we just screamed. And that was all noise that at that point in time, they thought would make sure that the evil spirits would go away, that they would be scared away, and that they would have good fortune coming out through the rest of the year. So pretty amazing. It's pretty cool. Generally speaking, fireworks hung out in China for a really long time. And then it wasn't really until the 13th century or so, they made their way along the Silk Road to Europe. And it really was part of by the Renaissance, the whole of Europe had these. So there was a lot of people that were conjuring different mixtures. So they took the basic mixture that was in China, and they messed with it, and they did the things that they needed to do to try to make it better and to become masters of the craft. So they developed a much more sophisticated techniques for putting it together. They added color. So up to that point, they were kind of like the flash bombs. It was just a big white light. They added color. They used iron for gold sparks, copper for blue, strontium for red, and it became really an art form that was in Italy for the most part. They had a lot of pyrotechnics in there, that pyrotechnic masters, I guess you would say, and they developed ways to make the colors come out of the sparks. So European royalty, when they discovered these in the 13th century, they loved the fireworks. They shoot them off for wedding celebrations, coronations, any military victories they might have had, and even New Year's Eve, of course. It was ultimate flex to show superiority, how much money they had, and it really provided, obviously, entertainment for people that were at those events. And it was not something to where it was generally available to just anybody as they are today. It was meant for royalty, as a lot of things were at that point in time. And when you had the money, you had the means to get things like that. So the Queen Elizabeth I was so obsessed with fireworks that she even created a position. The position was called the Fire Master of England. That was in the 19th century, and it was an actual job title. I looked on LinkedIn to see if that job title was still available today, but it is not, sadly. I would probably apply for it. I would have to somehow become a citizen of England, but I think that would be a pretty cool job to be, the fire master. Anybody that wants to have a master title would be fire master, would be one that I would take. So in Europe, they loved their fireworks, and then it came to America, of course, as well. So they really became associated with, our revolution. So the very first 4th of July in 1777 did feature fireworks, and that was in Philadelphia. But New Year's Eve fireworks really didn't become a massive tradition until really the 20th century. So they probably had the same type of things. Maybe when the president became president, a new president got elected, similar to a coronation in England, they would set off fireworks and they would have them for special occasions. But it wasn't something to where New Year's was that occasion yet that they would set off those fireworks. So the Times Square in New York City started really making the push for Americans to use fireworks. And that really wasn't until the early 1900s. So they started the dropping of their famous ball. That was actually in 1907. So if you stay up all around the country, depending on your time zone, and you're like, I want to see the Times Square ball drop. It started in 1907. So it's been going on for, almost, 120 years or so. But it wasn't until the end of the 1990s that the midnight celebration there became pyrotechnics. So it was spectacular. They started having all of these harbor explosions, in New York being on the coast, they had different rivers and they were launching fireworks all over the place. And, the East is really when it became extremely popular for the American people to start setting off fireworks at New Year's. So they set off about 3 tons of confetti then when they drop the ball. And then they have a massive fireworks display these days that really can be seen for miles. If you've ever gotten to see it in person, that is something that I would love to see one day. I have been to New York several times, but never have had the chance to be there on New Year's. Something that I hopefully will do. Maybe that'll go on my New Year's resolution list for 2020. We can see the ball drop in New York City. So cities around the world today, they compete to have the most spectacular New Year's Eve fireworks display. Sydney Harbor in Australia kicks things off because they're farthest in the time zones. If you have not listened to the time zones podcast that I had a couple of episodes ago, it might have been episode 5. I can't believe I've gotten to episode 12, but it was several episodes ago. It's pretty cool to talk about how they got time zones and how all that came. Australia kicks it off, and they have basically 100,000 individual pyrotechnic effects from all of the barges in Sydney Harbor and also from the bridge. That's more than 2,500 fireworks per minute at peak moments. So that is a lot of visual stimulation, a lot of noise, a lot of smoke. But what an amazing time. London fires them off, of course, from the London Eye. Dubai launched over 400,000 fireworks all the way back to 2014. So I can't even imagine, now being 2025, 2026, what they're launching off. But at the time, that was a world record. Paris lights up the Eiffel Tower, of course. Hong Kong has Victoria Harbor, and that becomes basically a floating fireworks platform. Here, my neighbors just annoy us with the things that are on the ground. Some of them shoot up in the air, bottle rockets and things like that. They just start at 8:30 my time, and they don't usually end until 1 o'clock. So I can't imagine what the noise is like in one of those big harbors. But the logistics for all of these are pretty crazy. They have pyrotechnic teams. They obviously have to spend months planning. You got to hope the weather's good. They choreograph everything to music. They have drone shows now, in addition to the fireworks. Basically, it is an art exhibition in the sky when they are launching all these fireworks off. So it's really cool. We look at it from afar, and you also have to realize that there are dangers to letting off fireworks. You're letting off explosive things. So, pretty important to have some safety, have some professionals. They have to know how to use these things. So, if you've ever accidentally lit a firework and it went off in your hand, maybe it was a small one. I know I've done that with a fountain before where I've lit it, it went fast and it kind of burned my hand. Can't imagine what these things do. So, it's really cool because from a psychological standpoint, it's fascinating to think that, a New Year's Eve service has the same purpose that they did in China for their ritual of transition. So we make a bunch of noise. We're passing the old year out and we're bringing in the new year that's typically filled with hope, and it's filled with you wanting to do things that are going to cause you to have a great year. So some of those are going to be resolutions. So all those loud bangs and all those things basically make a clear boundary that, hey, the previous year's over, the new year's about to begin, and why not make it special by committing to yourself to do things. So there's also something really primal about it. I think everybody, even my kids, when we used to do them, there's something about lighting fireworks, even if it's just sparklers, lighting those, your sense of well-being really comes into, and you get kind of a guttural type of a primal feeling. You're excited to see it. It lights you up. It puts a smile on your face. It gives you enjoyment, even if it's for that split second where that fountain or that firework explodes. It also is awe and wonder, which goes a lot into your year coming. You don't know what you're going to expect coming into this year, but hopefully it's filled with, some awe, and it's filled with some wonder. And that's a lot of what fireworks have. They're just really cool to look at too. I love all the colors. I love seeing the things that spin. I love the loud noises. I like the ones that spread all the way across the sky. I think those ones are cool. So just a really neat way to establish that the old year is over and the new year's beginning. So, there's been a lot of research on the psychological effects, but it's basically a collective catharsis. We're all releasing a bunch of tensions and anxiety from ending the year, because as you get into Christmas and you are trying to put family together, you're trying to see family, you're trying to do all the things for Christmas. If you have kids, it's pretty manic. Have presents to wrap for people. You have presents to buy for people. You don't know what to buy. There's all this stress, and then you get to relieve some of that anxiety by blowing things up. What else? What else is better than blowing things up to end the year? So it's pretty neat. So going back to some resolutions and how therapeutic, letting off fireworks can be, you still need to go and write some resolutions if you want to try and improve. It was many centuries that these resolutions were not written down. They weren't, publicized by anybody. They were just, things that you prayed to that particular god, or that you said to people maybe in your village and things that maybe you wanted to do, but it wasn't really public. So in medieval Europe for centuries, basically, the Christians transformed this practice into something called the peacock vow. And I thought this was pretty interesting when I looked it up. It was where knights would place their hands on a peacock, which at that time was considered a very noble bird. They would renew their commitments to chivalry, so making sure that they were pure of spirit and kind. And then they had a sense of purpose again, and they renewed that every year. So it was kind of like a New Year's resolution, but obviously it was way more dramatic. I have a library that's near us that has a bunch of peacocks that roam around this library. super cool to look at, but definitely scary if you get anywhere near them because they're scary birds. They're also a lot larger than you think they are. The backsides of them are just beautiful when they open up all the feathers, of course, but they kind of nestle in with each other, and you really don't want to get near them because they're not necessarily tame birds there. They're a little bit more wild. So I definitely wouldn't try to go on New Year's Day and put my hand on a peacock tail and say, I'm going to renew my chivalrous vows. So, but by the 17th and 18th century, the practice evolved into something called the watch night services, where people would reflect on the last year and the mistakes and vow to resolve them and do better in the future. So, really, maybe more like the modern type of resolution that we have now. The religious undertones were still strong, but the concept was becoming much more of a more personal accountability and less about appeasing the gods or God from just the New Year's resolution type of aspect that we now. So we have had a lot of, from the religious perspective, it's moved into more of a secular type of resolution. Instead of trying to please the gods, we are trying to please ourselves and perhaps please other people that are around us as we make these resolutions and change things. So the self-improvement focused type of resolutions, as we know it today, really took off as well in the 20th century. Kind of coincides with fireworks. We blow stuff up, and then all of a sudden we have this great idea to now say we need to improve ourselves in 100,000 ways. So with the rise of psychology and the way we think, and the way that self help works, resolution shifted from kind of the moral and religious commitments to personal goals. We see a lot of goals out there: lose weight, save money, learn a new skill, treat people better. There's all kinds of different things that we have that are much more personal to us, and they are more commitments and trying to stay to those commitments than they are to try to please, a deity of any kind. So this day and age, we are in the social media onslaught, I guess you would say. I don't know if this is the golden age of social media, but we have a lot of social media, and you're probably watching this on some sort of social media or listening on some sort of social media. So I greatly appreciate it. But it's amplified the discussion and talking about your resolutions exponentially. We basically just don't make resolutions privately. We announce them to the world. We will have people on whatever it is, Facebook, Twitter, which is now X, people on LinkedIn. I was just on LinkedIn the other day. A lot of people putting their New Year's resolutions on LinkedIn. They are announcing things that they want to do to the world. And what is really kind of interesting is that the thought might be that they have thousands of accountability partners out there. So it's not something to where these people are looking at it and saying, I'm just going to be accountable to myself. I'm going to have a few close friends that might hold me accountable, but they're putting this out there for everybody to see. And it could be that those people are also going to hold them accountable. In some cases, that could be for you. Some cases, that could work against you, depending on what you do with those resolutions and how you are at completing them. So the sad part about it is that, the New Year's resolutions that people make, and they often think, how do I actually make this work? Well, the sad truth is only about 20% of people end up clearing and going throughout the year, making their New Year's resolutions, and about 80% of them actually fail by February. So they don't even get a month in. By February, New Year's resolutions are really starting to go down. The commitment's not there, and it's really tough. And most resolutions don't survive a second month. And there was a study from the University of Scranton. They found out that only about 8% of people actually achieve their New Year's resolutions at all. So even if it's something to where I'm going to, for 3 months, I'm going to go to the gym every day and I'm going to get up and walk every day or something of that nature, 8% of those people don't even get that part of their resolutions. So 92% of us are setting ourselves up for, some sort of disappointment, some sort of discouragement. Hopefully it doesn't discourage you too much to where you don't want to do it again. But as they always say, you get knocked down, you get back up again. So you can always continue to try. So don't get too discouraged. And, we'll break this down a little bit farther. The critical period really for, they say you got to do something, I think it's for 2 weeks or 3 weeks to make a habit. And so January 17th actually is what some researchers have dubbed Quitter's Day. that is where approximately 43% of people expect to give up on their resolutions before February even begins. And data suggests that they're pretty accurate in that prediction. So if you can make it for the first 3 weeks and create that habit for the first 3 weeks, you have a pretty good chance of at least going a lot farther than the 92% that give up before hitting February. So by the end of January, statistics show approximately 64% of resolution makers have already abandoned their goals. So we spend time planning, we take a look at things, we say, what do I want to do? How do I want to achieve it? What can I do? And then by basically the end of January, 64% of us are already failing. So about 46% of those, they're kind of still hanging on to the hopes that they get it done. But by year's end, it drops to about 10%. So I personally make a couple of resolutions. I have made resolutions every year. Sometimes I do hit them for a little bit longer. I don't know, or I don't recount if I actually have hit them. Last year was one of my resolutions to journal every day or journal more. I never really journaled. That lasted me about 10 days. I got into it. I bought a nice journal. I bought a nice fountain pen, which I've never had before. So that was a learning experience on how to use a fountain pen. And could I even write? I type on a keyboard all day, or I type on my phone all day. If you have to go and actually write something on paper, it took me a little bit of practice just to be able to read what I had written. I was writing in cursive, and some words were in print, some words were in cursive, some stuff was capitalized. I was like, I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm just flowing thoughts out there, kind of like I do on this podcast. I just kind of flow thoughts out there, and hopefully I can understand what I say when I watch it back. So it is something to where I did not stick with that. There's no reason for it either. I know that I can go to my room, spend 10 minutes right before bed. I could write my day down. It's kind of like this podcast. Wanted to talk about things that were interesting to me. I don't know if they're interesting to other people. And I am just excited that I made my 12th episode. This was not a resolution that I made at any point. Last year, I didn't say, hey, I want to really start a podcast. A couple of years ago, I did try to start a YouTube channel, and it was going to follow the bands, but I didn't have enough time to do a bunch of editing and things like that. So it's difficult. So props out there to all you YouTubers that are putting things on multiple times a week, doing all the editing. You're incredible and inspiring to me. So, but the most common resolutions, we talked about a couple of them. Number one by far is exercise or improve your fitness. It's consistent. It's the top. It is totally difficult at some kinds, especially if you have fallen well off the wagon. The wagon is not even close to you. It is 5 miles down the road. You can't even see the dust from the wagon. But it is the number one resolution. Lose weight is the other. Kind of coincides with exercise or more fitness, but just a general weight loss goal. You don't know me well, but I have struggled with weight loss and weight gain for probably 10 years, and I keep going on and off the ketogenic diet. So I didn't make a resolution to do it, but I actually am back on it. So we're going to see how that goes throughout the year. Eat healthier coincides with all those as well. Save more money or make more money. Those are two things that basically coincide with each other. Sometimes you don't necessarily have to make more money to save more money. You just have to spend more wisely. But that is a critical one. Spend more time with family and friends. This is one that I really tried to focus on last year. I did say that I wanted to spend more time with family. For our families, one of our daughters moved away. We started doing Sunday night dinners where we bring the family together because that's what my family did. It was a tradition. We don't get it every week, but I watched a sobering Instagram reel where it talked about if you are a certain age, let's say if you move out of your house at 30, you only see your parents at holidays like at Christmas or Thanksgiving or something. You may only see them another 30 or 40 times in your lifetime. So it was pretty sobering. So I wanted to not be that way. So we created Sunday night dinners, and we come and we get together. It's a couple hours. It's a lot of fun, and I really love having the time with my family. It's the most important thing to me. So more resolutions. Quit smoking, very top of the list, very important these days. I think a lot of people are smoking. I was reading some statistics that smoking is down. Vaping is up, but smoking is down. So I don't know that's a debate for another time of which one's actually better for you, whether smoking or vaping is better. But quit smoking is one. Get more sleep. We can all use more sleep. I actually, without having a resolution, did that this year. I last year, I should say. I got a smartwatch for the first time, and it tracked my sleep every night. So it was kind of interesting to see how little I was sleeping. And I made it a point to go to bed earlier and try to stay in bed for that extra like 15, 20 minutes to get that good 7 to 8 hours that is good for me. I was at 5 to 6 hours and really did actually change and impact me. So, and then of course, learn a new skill or hobby. I don't have that on my radar this year. Between music and golf and learning how to podcast, I think I'm good. So I don't know if you noticed though, there's a pattern. Most of these are about, breaking long established habits or creating entirely new habits. So you have people that have been smokers for 35 years that might want to try to quit. I wish them well. If you're one of those on the podcast that's trying to quit smoking because of health reasons, I wish you well to do that. And, good luck. I would love to hear, in the comments what some of your New Year's resolutions are for all of you listeners. I think it's really interesting to see what is important to people out there. But, all of these are really hard to do. So the big question is, if they're so hard, why do we commit to them? And why are they so easy to fail at? So psychologists have kind of pointed to several key reasons. So one, people set overly ambitious goals. So we used to call in retail, we used to have these BHAGs is what they call them, big, hairy, auspicious goals. And I think that's what people do a lot of times in their resolutions. I know I do. If I said right now, my ideal weight is 165 pounds or something like that. And I know I don't need to lose 100 pounds, but if I knew I needed to lose 100 pounds this year, I think that would be a pretty tough goal. So I set, some manageable goals for myself as far as my weight loss goes. It's tough and it's easy to get discouraged if you don't see the scale going down. And again, that's a whole nother conversation. I know you shouldn't weigh every day, but I do. You can flame me in the comments if you want, but I do because that actually motivates me for that day coming through. There's also a lot of all or nothing thinking. So why try if I can't succeed? So one slip up, if I have a bad day eating, one slip up and people feel like they failed entirely. You abandon the whole thing because you had one bad day or you did something wrong. If we did that with everything in our life, we wouldn't have any relationships. We wouldn't have joy probably because I slip up things every day. So, as I talked about in my perfectionism paradox podcast, I think there was episode 3 or 4. There are certain things that I am so specific about, and then there are certain things that I'm just like, oh, that's okay. I'll just do it tomorrow, and I don't know what it is. The other thing is, for reasons that they fail, is lack of preparation. So people don't properly put a plan in place at all. I am not a great planner for things. I plan podcasts and I plan golf. I do work very hard at music. So that is something I plan also, of course, at work. But, you don't typically think about these things that are going to set yourself up for success. So we a lot of times fail when we fail to plan. I mean, that's an old phrase, right? So that's one of the things that people do that cause them to fail. So the other thing is, as I was just talking about social media and having accountability partners, there's not a accountability system that people put in place. So I have a couple of close friends that will tell me things that, probably other people will not. So I really appreciate them. And if they're listening, you probably know who you are. I do appreciate the feedback and I appreciate you being able to, tell me when I'm slipping up. And sometimes you have to ask. I have asked people to be an accountability partner and say, hey, keep me honest with my eating. When I do, the hardest thing for me for eating is when I go out on gigs. I don't always have control or self-control. So we're at a restaurant and I want a beer and that kind of just blows my whole ketosis. So there's certain things out there, I have an accountability partner that say, hey, don't have the beer, have some more water instead, or have a, Coke Zero or something. So that's one of the things, trying to change everything at once. A lot of times we look at a lot of aspects of our lives. If I say, oh, I want to get my finances together, I want to exercise more, I want to eat better, I want to spend more time with friends, I have an addiction that I want to get rid of. There are just so many limitations that you have. So this is not turning into a psychological episode, but treat yourself kindly. Be realistic about maybe tackling one thing at a time, and prioritize which those are. So you can prioritize what is the most important thing. So try not to change too much at once. So Pretty interesting discussion as far as resolutions go. We have a lot of people on social media that have talked about their resolutions and they have failed. This went a little bit long for me for the podcast of where I'm trying to stick within a certain time frame. I do have some examples of people that failed epically, but that's probably going to take me another 10 minutes, 15 minutes to go through. But just look up some stories. I would encourage you to look up this topic a little more. If you're serious about your resolutions, they don't have to start at New Year's. That's the other thing that in my research that I looked at from a psychological aspect is that people will say, well, I started on New Year's. I already failed by the 15th of January. I might as well just give up. There really is no time frame for you to improve yourself, improve your health, whatever it is that you are looking for. So you can just do it at any point in time. If you decide in March, just pretend in March is New Year. They have Christmas in July, so maybe you have a July New Year as well. Who knows? Follow the Chinese New Year. If you fail by January 17th, say, well, I got the Chinese New Year coming up somewhere between January and mid-February. I can start then again. So it's really kind of neat. I enjoy the topic. I liked learning about this. I see so much in myself. So I just want to encourage you today that if you are already feeling here on the 5th or 6th of January that you're probably not going to hit your New Year's resolutions, not something to fret about. I think that you should just re-examine some of the things we just talked about of maybe not making the goals as lofty, putting a plan in together, and then having somebody accountable or somebody around that can hold you accountable to it. And I think it'll be way better. So the fascinating thing, despite the dismal success rates of things, the statistics show that about 45 to 50% of Americans make New Year's resolutions still. We make them every year, even though we may have an idea that we are not going to be able to hit that goal. Maybe we made it too lofty. We still put them on anyway. So why is that? It's because there's something really powerful about a fresh start. So psychologists call this the fresh start effect, actually. It's a temporal landmarks like New Year's birthdays or even, a Monday, if you've ever had the Sunday scaries and you're thinking about a thing that happening Monday that you have a big meeting or a presentation and you start getting scared. Sunday, there's a big psychological boost that motivates us to achieve goals and to pursue our goals. So it's really interesting that we have this way of when we achieve a goal, what that feeling is like. And that a lot of times motivates people more than anything. I was talking to my spouse the other day and she was asking me about working out. I've never been a person that's liked to lift weights or do anything of that nature. Way back, maybe 15 years ago, yeah, I really did get into a program that I was lifting weights all the time, but I really didn't like any moment of it. And she actually asked me, was there any point in time because you had these breakthroughs, people are starting to say, oh, I can see the shape and the tone of your muscles and things like that. And I said, no, I said, every day was a struggle for me to get up. And I know people in my own circle that get up and work out every day and they love it and they couldn't live a day without going to the gym and lifting weights, doing the treadmill. Just not how I am built. So that's okay though. So even if you failed at your resolutions for 10 years straight, January 1st just happened, create some resolutions today, start them tomorrow. Nobody's going to say, oh, well, you didn't start at January 1st, so you can't start them at all. That's really kind of the beautiful thing about it. One of those things about my dieting is that you can have a day that you're off and then you just get back on the wagon. So hopefully I am able to obtain that this year. Maybe through the podcast, maybe I'll give little updates of where I'm at. Who knows? I don't know if that'd be interesting to anybody, but it would be interesting to me and be something to share. My biggest success, actually, when I was losing weight was for us to go to Scotland. And I posted my weight and my stats every day on social media. And I was reading through it the other day. That's actually what prompted me to get back on this and really start again was the encouragement that I had from so many people on social media. There were some naysayers on the actual diet itself, but for the most part, at that point in time, it wasn't a New Year's resolution, but it was somewhere in March where I was like, hey, we're going to a year from now, we're going to Scotland and I want to be able to walk up and down the mountains and walk through the Highlands and do all the stuff that we were going to do and be in a little bit better physical shape. No reason that you have to, only say that it's January 1st is that kind of resolution. So, who knows? And you might be in that remarkable 8 to 10%. Would also love to hear from anybody if you have set a resolution in January, you have maxed out that resolution, and you actually took it all the way through the year. That would be an amazing story to hear because it doesn't happen very often. So, maybe the Babylonians were onto something 4,000 years ago. Maybe they thought, hey, it would be a good thing to not look back at our past failures and look forward. So, whether you're promising gods or you're promising yourself, acting and committing to growth and change to be better, that matters. And I will just, again, want to encourage you to try to create something to revolutionize your life, but realize that you don't have to do it overnight. It's going to be something that might take some time, but you can make those small changes. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of Archives and Anchovies. If you were driving, I hope that you were driving safely and you were listening to it hands-free. And if you were just streaming it at some other point, I really appreciate it. If you could give us a follow, share the podcast with your friends. Would love to hear any feedback that you have, positive, negative, it doesn't matter. Any feedback is good. I would also really love to have you post some comments. If you have any comments about what we talked about today, check out some of the other episodes that I've mentioned during this podcast. And I hope that you have a fantastic day. And I can't wait till the next time we meet. This is James Coulon for Archives and Anchovies. Have a wonderful afternoon, evening, and day.